identified the different types of activities, how to schedule a pipeline based on the normal scheduling aspect. So it's a time-based schedule wherein you can schedule it based on minute, hour, day, etc. But imagine in case if there are requirements wherein you need to trigger the pipeline on event basis. Meaning, let's say that in case if something happens, then trigger the pipeline rather than a fixed schedule via the scheduled route. So in those aspects, there is something called as add trigger at the pipeline level. So it's like an event-based trigger for the data pipelines that are being present so that it would be triggered on occasion of certain aspect rather than being scheduled on a timely manner. So on that, what are the different types of event scenarios that are available and how to schedule them, on how to configure them, correct? So for that, now let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. So now based on the event trigger aspect, so rather than the normal schedule route, we'll go the trigger route. So for that, there is a functionality called add trigger. Now in the trigger, what should be the source for my trigger? So there are three aspects, correct? First is you need to monitor for certain event. That is your monitor section. It is which event on which you need to take some action. So for that monitoring aspect, you need to select the source for that corresponding event. So under monitor, select events, click on that. It would give you different types of events, real-time events that are present. One is Azure Blob Storage events. Azure Blob Storage events are the events that are produced by actions on the files or folders in the Azure Blob Storage location. Meaning, if you all remember, we have an Azure Blob Storage, correct? Remember, storage account serves two different purposes. One is Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, depending upon the property of enable hierarchical namespace. Now, how to validate whether a storage account is an Azure Blob or an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2? So for that, click on the corresponding storage account. And under the overview section, check the blob service hierarchical namespace. It is disabled, meaning this is an Azure Blob Storage itself. Now under that, under data storage, under containers, what this states is that events produced by actions on files or folders such as blob created, deleted, or renamed. Meaning within this container, I can set up certain events wherein in case if a folder is created, if a file is created, or if something is deleted, then trigger the necessary pipeline or the necessary action. That is with respect to the Azure Blob Storage events. Now, OneLake event. If you all remember, there is something called as there is Lakehouse, Fabric Lakehouse, correct? So within Fabric Lakehouse, if you create some files or folders, then take the necessary action. There can be a scenario wherein a user might manually upload a file in the Lakehouse file section. Once he uploads the file or makes any changes or renames it or deletes it, some flow should get triggered automatically. So for that, we have OneLake events. Workspace Item events is in case if you create anything in the workspace or delete or rename, then trigger the necessary aspect. And similar is the case with job events that monitor the job, and in case of success or failure of any of the job, trigger the necessary data pipeline. Now, let's take the use cases, correct? Azure Blob Storage is the PaaS version of your data lake, and Fabric Lakehouse is the SaaS version of your data lake. And data lake basically acts as the raw or the staging layer of your data, wherein you extract all the data and put it into the staging layer. So once a raw data gets created or present at your storage layer or the raw layer, the next aspect is immediately some of your job flow needs to be triggered. So OneLake events or Azure Blob Storage events are pertaining to trigger of some aspect based on some data changes. Job events. Imagine that you have multiple jobs that have been scheduled, multiple data pipelines, etc. Rather than embedding the email notification or the Teams notification activity within individual pipelines, what you can do is monitor the jobs, and depending upon any failure of any of the job, you can trigger a pipeline that would send email notification pertaining to that corresponding job. Workspace item events. Unfortunately, based on the permission set that we had seen, there are 4 types of permission: viewer, contributor, member, and admin. Now, or the owner. Now, anyone having contributor access can go ahead and delete any of the components that have been created. And even to trigger a data pipeline in the workspace, one has to have minimum of contributor access. So just to trigger a pipeline, I am giving him or her the access to even delete the pipeline. That's one of the critical aspect, correct? So in case if someone accidentally deletes any of the item or creates anything wherein you need to have a proper process that only X person can create it. Any new creation should go via approval process. So you need to be notified if something gets created, then you would use workspace item events. So these are the different types of event types via which one can do an event-based trigger. So in our use case, we'll proceed with the Azure Blob Storage events. So for that, click on the Azure Blob Storage event. Now first is you need to connect to an existing blob storage account, correct? Or a storage account. Now, since I have already connected to a storage account, rather than that, I'll go the route of creating a new connection. So I need to first select the subscription. So here I have a trigger storage account demo that I have created, which is a storage account, and that belongs to Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. So Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. Now here I need to use which storage account? Trigger storage account demo. Correct? Now, what this would do is, once I create this aspect, correct? What it does is, in the workspace, it creates an event stream. Now, what is event stream? Event stream basically monitors what all changes are transpiring in the corresponding storage account. Now, for that, let's understand what is getting created end to end. Okay. Let me go to my other resource group called Copilot. It would be easier if I create another storage account. That would be easier for you all to understand. So within the Fabric Copilot resource group, I have a Fabric Copilot storage account. Now, if you see, There are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 components that are present in this resource group. Correct? Now, let me remove this. Let me go back here and select the Copilot storage account, the Fabric Copilot storage account. Now, once I select the storage account on which I want to set up the event trigger, you can see that a new event stream is getting generated. Now, what is this? Event stream, as the name suggests, is a streaming flow for events. I can rename it as to what event stream should get created. So, Copilot event stream storage. Copilot event stream. Copilot storage event stream. Now, next. Here, I want to select what type of event needs to be triggered for the event stream. Meaning, do I want the event stream to get notified when a blob is created? Blob is created meaning a file is uploaded or a folder is created. Correct? Or when something is deleted or something is changed, etc. So there are different types of permissions that are present. In our scenario, I want when a blob is created, meaning whenever something gets created in that corresponding blob location, I want to trigger. So I've selected only that specific type. Now, this filter aspect is for some of the advanced aspect. Like, now imagine that within the storage account, in case I want within a specific path to trigger. Now, the storage account would contain multiple files, multiple containers. Correct. Now, based on the current configuration, what would happen is whenever anything is uploaded in this container or in that storage account, it would be triggered because blob create trigger with no condition. But imagine if I want that in case if a file is uploaded only in this container, that go ahead and trigger the pipeline, then you can leverage this filter condition. And we'll take a look afterwards on this filter condition in detail. So for now, let's proceed with the simple aspect, correct? So now next. So now this states that because of this, what I'm doing is my event type is Microsoft.storage.blob created. This is my event stream name that I'm creating within this corresponding workspace. Connect. Now what is happening is first it is creating Azure Blob system events. What does that mean? It is creating Azure Blob storage system events. Now the create event stream was the event stream that we created within the workspace. What is this that is actually happening? This is also successful. So now let me go to the resource group. Earlier there were only 6 components. Now in case if I refresh here, a new component got created called event grid system topic. So that is what is actually happening here. Meaning event grid system topic, basic event grid is like an event aspect that monitors the changes that are getting created in the Azure Blob storage. This would send the corresponding event to the event stream that is created within the corresponding workspace. The corresponding event stream that got created, Copilot storage event stream that got created in the workspace. So an event grid monitors the changes in the Azure Blob storage, sends those corresponding alerts to the event stream captures it, and then takes the necessary action, and that will take what corresponding actions are getting taken. So now my monitor has been configured, meaning what type of event I want to monitor, and based on that take the necessary action. Now the action that I want to take once the blob is created is I want to run a fabric item. And what do I want to run? I want to run a corresponding pipeline from this workspace. And it is run pipeline job. That's the action that I'm taking. Now, I need to save this in a specific location as a new item, meaning I set up the monitor. And while setting up the monitor, I had to create the event stream that acts as your monitoring aspect. But then in order to trigger the pipeline, there is another experience within Microsoft Fabric that we had seen called data activator. So I have to create an activator. So hence I'll create a new activator called Storage Copilot Activator. And what this would do is, this would go ahead and create a corresponding data activator within my corresponding workspace. Data activator is the one that actually triggers the corresponding pipeline. So any queries up till now?
Okay. So Nandan, that monitor actually just monitors and this activator will trigger, correct? That is correct. The difference, right? Okay.
Correct. So now let's go ahead and check the objects that we created now. So if you see, storage pilot activator got created. Correct. Now, in case if I click on the activator, you can see that as of now, there are no changes or no alerts that have no events. And because of no events, there are no alerts that have been configured. Correct. But it's still active. You can stop the corresponding alert in case if there is a need for the same. And it states that, and here you can have the conditional aspect in case if you want to edit the action, which pipeline do you want to change, etc. So you can make the corresponding changes with respect to the data activator. And imagine that there are some late arriving events. How much time do you want to wait it for? Correct. So you can set up the corresponding latency for the late arriving events in case if you know for sure. And on what operation do you want? So for every event, I want to trigger the corresponding action. And it is based on which event? The Fabric Copilot event that we created. As of now, there are no events that are present here. So this is with respect to the data activator. Now let's go ahead and see the event stream. So in the event stream, you would see that I have connected to the Azure Blob Storage. It provides me which storage account I have connected to, and correspondingly which event stream it has been mapping to, and the corresponding data insights in case if there are any incoming and outgoing messages that has triggered up till now. So this is your event stream. Now let's go ahead and make some triggers. Now for that, let me go and check the view run history first. So under run, view run history, I can see that up till now only one trigger was triggered for this pipeline, and that was at 7:54 AM and it was submitted by me. Now let me go ahead and upload some file within the corresponding container. So in this case, let me go ahead and upload a file. So I'm uploading a dbt log file. Now the file got uploaded. Once the file got uploaded, I can see that an event got created. Let's take a look with respect to that event. So if you see in the source, I can see that this was the event that got created. Every event has its own ID. The source is basically storage account / Fabric Copilot in the hover section that I can see. The subject is dbt.log. Remember this _source_subject. And it is based on the type blob created. Imagine that there were multiple types of events that I could have selected, correct? Blob created, blob deleted, directory, rename, etc. So in case if I would have had selected multiple of those, then which type of that event was generated, this provides that detail. Since for our case it is just blob created every time, it would always be the same. So this shows me that a corresponding event got created. And let me go ahead and check the data pipeline now. So any queries up till now? And remember this aspect of the subject and the source. Okay, scrap. Sorry, my fault. View run history. If you see, okay, let me go ahead and check the monitor aspect. So based on this, the pipeline was correspondingly triggered. I can see that the pipeline was triggered based on this event. And since the pipeline was created by me, it can see that it was triggered by my action itself. And I can see there is a corresponding action that got created. So any queries on the pipeline initiative, event trigger aspect of the data pipelines? Now, you can also test the corresponding action via the alert that you have created, correct? In case if you want to test whether the corresponding data activator is taking the necessary action or not, you can click on the test action scenario. What test action does is it would send the test action from the existing data point to the necessary activator, to the data activator, and then take the necessary action. So now it would go ahead and trigger the pipeline again. So this provides that all our actions are successful. Now let's go ahead and deploy another, upload another file. So now when I upload another file, correspondingly, another event got generated because another file got uploaded and necessary actions would have been taken now. So under the event, I can see a second event that got created. dbtfabric.log. And I can see that activation, a rule activation got created. The pipeline was triggered. So team, any queries on the a new pipeline, a new event got triggered based on the file upload? So any queries on the blob event trigger aspect? Now, let's understand some of the scenarios of it. Like, imagine that it's Fabric Copilot. Now, imagine that I want to have certain conditions, like rather than triggering on any type of file. As of now, the files that I uploaded were .log extension, correct? But imagine I want to trigger the file only based on .xl extension only, XLSX extension only, correct? So how to do those aspects? It's based on the events that are getting triggered that you can understand how to filter on those aspects. Meaning, in the event aspect, under the live feed, I'm able to see the different details, correct? So within that, under source, I get the corresponding blob account name. But under subject, I get the corresponding extension that is getting created, correct? Meaning it is this file that is triggering. It is this file that is triggering the aspect. So what we can do is, under the field, select the corresponding event value, like underscore subject, correct? So I can select subject string ends with .xlsx. This would ensure that only the files with extension .xlsx when uploaded would initiate the corresponding events. For other types of extension, it won't work across. Understood the significance of this set filter aspect? This is to make it much more generic, use case specific, rather than having it a holistic aspect for the entire any extension of file. And there are multiple types of events that you can set up, like one-click events. In one-click events, in case if one-click file is created, folder is created, correct? Then on which source do I want, correct, file getting created? If you remember at the backend, Lakehouse or Warehouse, every time you create something in the one-click, something gets created, the corresponding Delta Parquet files, correct? So I can select the Lakehouse in this aspect. But as a part of a case study, what I want you all to do is, as of now, when I uploaded a file in the Azure Blob Storage, it got triggered only once. Now, try creating an event trigger with file created in OneLake Lakehouse and create a table in your OneLake and check how many times does the pipeline get triggered. It won't be once, it would be multiple times, and you'll understand why there are multiple instances of pipeline getting triggered. So to avoid multiple instances of pipeline getting triggered when a file is created, you can add specific filter criteria so that it's only triggered once. So that I leave it as part of today's case study. That is, create a pipeline, try to create an event trigger or add a trigger based on OneLake file events on file created, and try to create a table in the Lakehouse which you have configured with, and check how many times is the pipeline getting triggered, and how to ensure that only once does the pipeline get triggered, meaning what filter criteria would you all add for the same. That would be part of your case study for today. So any queries on the concept of triggers? You all can explore the different types of triggers, like when set up one for workspace item events, correct? When a workspace item is created, deleted, it would automatically trigger. And rather than creating a new event stream every time, you can leverage the existing event stream itself. That is part of the current workspace. So that you will understand once you actually create across, or the data activator once you actually create across multiple events as part of the case study for today. So any queries on data pipeline as a whole? We covered everything from understanding the Git integration to JSON edit to export import templates to activities to monitoring, and now scheduling and triggering the corresponding pipelines. This completes the concept of data pipelines. So any queries up till now? Anything pertaining to data pipelines? Okay, I'll take it as a no then. So we saw that in data pipeline, the major activity is the copy activity that just copies the data from one location to another location without any transformation. But what if I have a requirement wherein I do need to transform the data? So in such scenario, if I do need to transform the data, Microsoft Fabric provides us two types of resources. One is Dataflow Gen 2, which is part of the Data Factory experience itself. So it's also a low-code, no-code way, a UI-based way to do the transformations. So those who are familiar with Power Query, they might be more intended to use that Dataflow Gen 2 aspect. But it has its own set of limitations. For that, Microsoft provides a coding mechanism way called Fabric Notebooks, in which you can do your end-to-end coding based on different types of languages. So now we would take a look with respect to the Dataflow Gen 2 aspect. So now let me go ahead and create a Dataflow Gen 2. Now remember, there is Dataflow Gen 1 and Gen 2. In case of Dataflow Gen 1 and Gen 2, 95% it's the same aspect, but with change in how in the backend everything is happening. But one aspect that majorly differs across Dataflow Gen 1 and Gen 2 is something called as the destination aspect that I'll discuss once I create the Dataflow Gen 2. So first, let's go ahead and create a Dataflow Gen 2. Now, those who have created the Dataflow Gen 2 earlier, for them, the Git integration is not available. but newly created data flow Gen 2 with this property enabled have the Git integration synchronization available. So df git sync. So I'll go ahead and create one data flow Gen 2. Now remember, data flow Gen 2, even for normal set of transformation, consumes a very heavy set of fabric capacity. Hence, though it is a low code, no code, in case if there is criticality, CPU capacity criticality, then usually we tell to avoid data flow Gen 2 and have that equivalent code done in notebook. Notebook consumes a lower amount of capacity over data flow Gen 2 for the same test of task that is being accomplished. So now, this is the home page of the data flow Gen 2. Now, what does data flow Gen 2 do? It basically does the transformation on the data. So first step for me is to get the data that I want, on which I want to do the necessary transformations. So in this case, I connect to my Azure SQL database. So now I'll connect to my Copilot database. So for that, let me provide the server name, provide the database name. Now I can see that there is already an existing connection that I have done. Correct. So I'll use that connection itself. Now, since the database is in post state, it does take some time for it to activate it because the database is a serverless database that we had created. So as a part of data flow Gen 2, first step is to get the data from different sources. Now, first aspect is we'll take the data from the Azure SQL database. But does it mean that within a data flow Gen 2, I can copy the data? Sorry, I can get the data from only one source? No, you can pull in data from multiple set of sources. And that's what we'll take a look across. Yeah. Okay. So I'm connected to my database, meaning it is now active. Now within this database, I have these many set of tables. Now I need to do some transformations on multiple set of tables. So I'll select these many tables on which I want to do some set of data transformations. So I have selected these many tables and I'll create that connection and data synchronization into the data flow Gen 2. Now here I can see that this is the data flow model, sorry, the visual representation pertaining to every table. I can see that as of now, I have selected the corresponding data. Now, as of now, these are the different data that I've selected from the Azure SQL database. Now imagine if I want data from some another source that I want to merge or munge with my existing data of the Azure SQL database, I can correspondingly select. So in this case, let me select the PUC Lakehouse, meaning I want some data from the Lakehouse. old connection, so I had to renew the connection. So within the lakehouse, I have one CSV file or these many set of tables that I want. So for now, I want the lakehouse CSV file to be loaded. And the execution sessions that I have executed on the lakehouse. Create. So there is no limitation or restrictions on the data, different sources that you are trying to pull the data with. So up till now, we have selected the data for which we need to do the necessary transformations. Now, what are the different types of transformations that are available? Let's take a look with respect to that. So now, let me duplicate this table, the address table. Meaning I'm creating a clone of that table. Correct? I can rename this table that is present here. Duplicate address. Then I can do multiple aspects, and that's what we'll take a look. I won't be covering each and every set of transformations, correct? But would drive you the way on how to do the transformations, what aspects can be done. So first step is, when I click here on the duplicate address, you can see something called as query settings. Here I can see all the steps, all the transformation steps that I'm doing on this corresponding set of table. Now, multiple times I've been saying the same statement, transformations, transformations. What transformations are we actually talking about? So now let's take a look here. So in the address ID table, in the address table, I want to only keep, I want to filter out all addresses other than 9, 11, 25, 28. So I filtered all other data, and corresponding to that, you can see that a filtered rows section got added in the visual representation of this, and correspondingly a step got added in the applied step section. Now let's state that here, when I right click on the corresponding column, I want to replace the values, or I want to do some set of transformation, meaning since here every value is null, I want to remove this column. Remove columns, meaning I can select multiple set of columns. Now I have selected two columns, and I'll select remove the columns. So both the corresponding columns got deleted or removed, and correspondingly the visual representation and the step got added. So this is a sequential step that keeps on getting added, and I can go ahead and remove the corresponding step in between, meaning rather than filtering the rows, I can delete this row. Delete that step, meaning the filter step got removed. Hence, all my data became visible again, but the columns that I deleted are still present because of this condition. But imagine that as of now, the step that I added of removing the column was nowhere dependent on the previous step of filtering the data. Hence, nothing broke in my corresponding flow. But imagine that you added a column. I'll come to that. Imagine you added a step in prior to the corresponding step, and your next step is dependent on that previous step. And if you delete that step, the next step would fail, stating that it is not possible. So now let me filter it again. So now I changed the flow. I removed the columns and then filtered. Now imagine that I want to remove all other columns except these two. Then I can use remove other columns. Or I can imagine that if this column contains duplicate set of values, I can click on remove duplicates. I can split the column based on certain delimiter. Meaning, imagine that I have a column with comma, comma separated values. I can split that single column into multiple columns by delimiter or by number of characters or by positions, etc. So now let me split the country region column by positions. Or let me split the column by number of characters. So UNITED 6 characters. So it split the country region column into country region .1, country region .2, United and state. I can rename it. Split 1. So it provided me the renamed column tag. Split 2. Now let me filter the data again based on the city brothel. Now, can you see filtered rows 1? Meaning I have filtered it 2 times. But what aspect have I filtered? Correct. In case if I want to identify which step, what has been filtered, you can click on the corresponding setting tab that is present here. This provides us details with respect to what aspects have been done. So here it states that I have filtered on address ID equal to 9, 11 and 25. Sorry, 9 or 11 or 25, meaning I filtered these 3 values. And here I filtered on city equal to brothel. So this is a visual way of seeing the data. But there is something called as an advanced editor here that provides us with the basically what is happening is whatever I am doing via visual or the UI way, Power Query is getting generated in the backend, and that's how Microsoft Fabric Dataflow Gen 2 preserves the changes. So it's under the advanced editor that I can go and check the set of queries that are happening. So now let's understand what we have done up till now. So initially I selected a source of the Azure SQL database with this name and this server. Within that, I navigated to the specific table that is saleslt.address. Then I removed address line 2 and state province columns from the corresponding data. Then I filtered the rows wherein I removed other rows that contained values other than address ID 9, 11 or 25. Then I split the column called country region based on the length of 6 characters across multiple set of columns. Now, why do I see country region 3, 4, 5, 6, this many? Because as of now, there was just United States based on the filtered data. But in the overall, there might have been multiple different set of values, larger values. So accordingly, it created multiple set of columns. Then I renamed these columns to split 1 and split 2. And then finally, I filtered on city equal to brothel. And that is my final aspect. Now, rather than manually doing the aspect, I can also code it from here as well. Meaning, let's say that I want to filter on address ID equal to 9. So under advanced editor, what I can do is as long as you are familiar with how to go this, correct? Filtered rows, I cannot have the same step name, correct? Filtered rows is the step name. If you see here, filtered rows 1 under the steps. So let me add filtered rows 2, or let me provide a proper name, correct? Direct code filter, correct? Now the final step is basically added as the in aspect. So I have to copy it here. Now here, I want to filter on. Now if you see, the current step, select rows, is dependent on the previous step of renamed columns. So now I want to add a dependency of this on the previous step, that is filtered rows. And I want to filter on address ID column, address ID, address ID equal to 9, since it's an integer column. And I'll click on OK. Now the failure was token comma expected, because after every, only in the last step that I do not have a comma. For all the precursor steps, there needs to be a comma. Hence the validation failed, and now I have to add a comma, and then I click on OK. Automatically a step got added and the data got filtered out. So those who are familiar with the Power Query can go ahead and directly make the changes here itself, rather than manually right clicking, manually making the set of transformations. Any queries up till now on the basic aspect of how a data flow Gen 2 works, that is how to get data, then how to do the transformations. Either it can be manually via from the applied step section by the corresponding UI, or you can do the set of changes via the advanced editor section itself. So any queries up till now? Now let's come on to some of the aspect. That is, if you see the name of this steps are pretty generic, like filtered rows 1, etc. Correct? So ideally, I can make a proper aspect of this. So if you right click on the corresponding step name and click on properties, correct, you can rename it to rename property, meaning whatever proper transformation you are doing, you can provide it and add the description as to what is this step doing. So imagine that in case if someone leaves the organization, a new person joins in the organization, for him or her to understand such complex set of transformation, it is better that you add description pertaining to every step, which unfortunately most of the folks do not do. So here if I add a step stating that this step filters on the data for this logical use case, it would preserve that in the metadata aspect. And then if I click on this, now you can see, correct, this information symbol, correct? Meaning I have added an information, and the information is this step filters on the data from this logical use cases. Now, imagine that if I want to move this step above, you can move before, after, etc. So these are the settings that one can do. Any queries up till now? Now, these were the base set of transformations that we did directly based on the column level aspect. But imagine that I want to Similarly, how we do here, correct? Right click, remove other columns. You have the similar aspect. Choose the columns, remove the columns, filter on the corresponding rows, or order this by ascending. Now, why did it give this? Because I have now selected the rename property, correct? Hence, what it would consider is I am trying to add a new step within direct code filter and rename property. So I have to select this, and then for now, let me remove this kind of filter, correct? Now here, if I click on order it, it would show me that an intermittent step is being added. But if I click on the last step and then try to do ascending, it would do, because it's the last step and a next step is getting added. So now the data got sorted in an ascending order. You can split the column that we saw by positions, etc. You can even group the data based on cities or states and then do the necessary group by aspect. Now, sometimes the data that comes in, you want to keep the first row as a header. So at that time, you can enable this property that use first row as header or use headers as the first row itself. You can define the data type of your column. You can change the data type of your column. Imagine that I want my postal code value. As of now, it is of type text, but I want it to be a type whole number for better analytical purposes. Correct? I can change the corresponding column type. The postal code got now converted to integer value or a whole number value, and a corresponding step got added. You can replace values. You can replace one value. Imagine that if I want to replace null with, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, or with some default values, I can then specify the corresponding set of actions that needs to be taken. Null value got replaced with 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are the different set of transformations that one can do easily based on UI aspect. Now you can also declare parameters for some parameterization use cases that are for advanced aspect, in case if you want to parameterize your data flow based on certain aspect. Now imagine that I want to merge two queries similar to join. Correct? I have a product table and I have a product category table. In product category table, okay, let me take a simple one. I have an address table and then I have a corresponding customer table. Now, in the corresponding customer table, I have the, okay, basically a mapping has been created. So for now, let's go ahead with a common aspect that imagine that there is only product and product ID that is present. Now I want to join these two tables, product and product description. So at that time, I want to merge the queries. But do I want to merge the query in the existing table itself, or do I want to create it as a new separate table? So for that, there is an option called merge queries as new. Now I want to merge the product table with the product category table. And based on the parent product category ID, or I want to self join it. So I join product category ID with the parent product category ID. self-join. Imagine that I have an employee table. Now every employee would have a corresponding ID associated with that. And every employee would have a supervisor ID associated to that. But in case if I want to get the supervisor name, I have to self-join the employee table with the employee table based on the supervisor ID and the employee ID to get the supervisor name. So that's what we are doing here. Now, I want to do different types of joins. You have left join, right join, full outer join, inner join, etc. Similar to how we have in SQL. Correct? Or you can do a fuzzy matching join as well, fuzzy logics. So now I want to do let's say I want to do an inner join, meaning only keep rows in which both are present. And I'll click on OK. So it created a new table since I created merge queries as new rather than merge queries in the existing itself. And since there are only 4 matches between those 2 columns, only 4 rows got created. And now here I'm getting an option to select which all columns I want from the corresponding product category table. I want the product category name only. So I can select and then select the corresponding product category name itself that I want, meaning I'm expanding it for the corresponding set of values. And since it was one value had multiple rows, hence it split into multiple rows for the same product category ID. So this is how you can do multiple set of joins and you can rename your corresponding table name, join scenario. Append queries is in case if you want to append the data in the existing table or as a new table itself. And then you can export the template. Now, what does that exported template do? It basically provides the template version that you can import within the corresponding Dataflow Gen 2 that we'll take a look later. So this was with respect to the home page. But imagine that I want help is with respect to any Power Query, shortcuts, etc. Correct? Now I want to check the diagram view, which is this one. Advanced editor. The corresponding steps scripts that I want. I also want the query script to be present corresponding to every query. What is the query that is being present across? The schema view, meaning for my corresponding table, what all schemas are present. Correct? And the data types. Then the data view. In data view, I can have what all aspects I want. Column profile. Now, what column profile gives me is what are the different set of values that are present across. Meaning, okay, that is some advanced aspect that I'll discuss later for you all. Correct, the column profile aspect. Let's first focus on the set of transformations. So column profile in layman terminology, it provides you distinct set of values, the profile, the data profile that is present within your corresponding column, distinct values, how many values are duplicate, etc. Now transformations, there are multiple set of transformations wherein in case if you want to transpose the data, replace values, replace data types, pivot the data, etc. I won't cover each and every set of transformations that you all can go and similar to how we covered some of the critical activities. Similarly, I've explained you some of the critical transformations, all other set of transformations that you all can take a look based on the Microsoft documentation. Now, in case of add column, imagine that I want to add some additional columns. Or imagine I want to delete the corresponding set of transformations. Right click and delete. Now, within the duplicate address, correct? Let me disable. Correct. Let me only have the step aspect. Now under transformation, sorry, under add column, imagine that I want to create a new column. Correct. I want to create a custom column, or I want to create a conditional column. If else conditional column. If this is equal to this, then true, else false. You can create your own set of custom columns. You can create, that is conditional column. You can create your own custom columns based on some Power Query transformations like concat, wherein you, let's say, since I have Copilot enabled, I'll tell what I would like to do. Concat the city column with address ID. So here I'm using a Copilot. So basically I'm providing a natural language aspect that I want to concatenate the column ID with the address ID value of type since city column is of type text, it automatically created the data type as text. Address ID was integer or the whole number that I had created. Hence, it automatically it created a formula to convert the address ID column to text and then concatenate city and address ID. Now, once I click OK, it would create a new column called city address ID. So now you can create multiple custom columns, create a new, provide the current date time. So based on some of the natural language, now why am I able to use Copilot? Because I am using an F64 capacity and this is not a trial workspace. Hence, I'm able to leverage Copilot to create my necessary natural language prompts that is automatically providing me the formula for my custom set of column transformations. So datetime.local now would provide me the current time for all the rows. So these are the set of different transformations or the Copilot aspect that one can use. Now one can even use Copilot for all these steps that we would cover in detail in tomorrow's session. But for today's understanding of Dataflow Gen 2, I hope it is clear that data pipeline used to only copy the data from one location to another as is. But as a part of data engineering, most of the use cases does have data transformation need. So Dataflow Gen 2 provides a low code, no code way of enabling data transformations on your data based on some UI set of aspects. But imagine if you want to do very custom specific transformations, then Dataflow Gen 2 would not be your point of tool to proceed with the data transformation. You need to use notebooks that you would see in the subsequent sessions. Now, whatever we saw, the Copilot aspect was just a tip of the iceberg that we saw with respect to creating the custom column. There are even all the set of transformations that I did, correct? That also can be governed from the Copilot pane that we are yet to use across. That we'll take a look tomorrow. Now, whatever we did up till now is the same aspect for data flow Gen 1 that is also present. Then what is the difference between data flow Gen 1 and data flow Gen 2? It's what we call as the data destination. In data flow Gen 1, one can only do the data transformations but cannot copy the data into a specific destination. So data flow Gen 1 was earlier part of Power BI ecosystem wherein you wanted to do some data transformation, generic data transformations. For that you had something called as data flow Gen 1. So that was very specific to Power BI case of data transformation for reporting and analytics. But now the data flow Gen 2 is a combination of transformations for Power BI, along with that a data transformation tool and loading it into particular destination. So the data destination is the major crux of difference between data flow Gen 1 and data flow Gen 2. And Microsoft is providing some of the ways to upgrade your existing data flow Gen 1 to data flow Gen 2. Eventually, at some point, Microsoft might stop the support of data flow Gen 1. And that time we would be enforced to move over to data flow Gen 2. But there is still time for that. So now imagine that I did these many set of transformations on this address table, correct? I want to copy this data into a corresponding destination. Now, unlike copy data activity that supported so many destinations, unfortunately, the number of the destinations that are supported in data flow Gen 2 are restricted. It's only specific to these 6 set of destinations that can be supported in data flow Gen 2. One is a lakehouse, warehouse, SQL databases. These are the 3 layers that are present within the Fabric ecosystem. In Azure, you can copy it into Azure SQL database and Azure Data Explorer. And now recently it's in preview, public preview mode called SharePoint, wherein you can upload the data in the SharePoint, but a CSV file. So now I want to copy my transformations into my corresponding lakehouse. Correct? So I'll select the lakehouse. Now, which lakehouse do I need to connect to? I can select it from here, correct? I want to copy that data into the CSV2 workspace. Within that workspace, there is a POC lakehouse workspace, and I want to create it as a new table, correct? Now I can even parameterize it. If you remember, there was something called as a parameter, correct? Let me go ahead and show that. So under home, there was something called as manage parameter. So let me create a new parameter. Table name, correct? Now in the table name, I want the table name to be always be present, meaning it's a required value. I can select what data type it is. It should be of type text. I can have it to be any value or list of specific set of values only that it can be pertaining. And then I can provide the current value. Let's say address decoded. So I can see under the query section that I have created a parameter. Now how to distinguish between a parameter and the tables and the merge you saw it in the merge a separate table with a question mark, a separate table got created. So these are the tables. These are the parameters. Now under duplicate address, I want to copy that data into a destination, let's say lakehouse. So I'll select the lakehouse as a functionality. I'll connect to it. And within the lakehouse connection, I want to copy it into the CSV to Excel workspace POC lake. And rather than duplicate address, I want to parameterize it, or I can manually enter value. I'll select the parameter and I'll select the parameter that I created as table name. And in that way, I can parameterize the table or the new table that needs to be created. So now, once I click on next, it would ask me whether I want to the mapping, correct? Do I want to create these columns, etc.? Now, since this was not expanded, this won't be included because that is a complex type. You saw, correct? I had to drill down on the specific columns that I needed. Then I'll save the corresponding settings. Now I can see that it's an update. It would replace the data rather than append the data every time it does. Finally, since now I have established my changes, correct? I can save and run my corresponding data flow Gen 2. So now it has started the refresh, meaning triggering. Now, how to check that? In case if I go to the Copilot, this source group, let me sort it by data flow Gen 2. And then click on the 3 ellipses and check the recent runs, or under settings. Okay. So you can check your recent runs. You all can see that it is in progress, and I can download the refresh history file that I need. So now the synchronization, the set of transformations, and then copying the data into the necessary destination of the lake house is in progress. Any queries?
So Nandan, here like the trigger works like a Power BI schedule only, correct? Like if I have to insert it at a regular schedule in that table, then I will schedule this, right? Data flow Gen 2.
You can schedule it based on the normal scheduling aspect, correct? So there are multiple ways how you can trigger a data flow Gen 2. First is you can schedule it, but this schedule, there can be only one schedule linked, correct? In case if you want event based aspect. So for that, you can trigger it from the data pipelines. And that's where I'll come to next, correct? So now the data synchronization is in progress. And under the settings, you saw that I can schedule it explicitly, correct? But imagine I want event trigger. Now the event trigger can be enabled on the data pipeline, correct? Now let me go to the trigger pipeline, correct? On which I have scheduled the event trigger. Now, under activities, there is something called as a data flow activity. Here, I can select which workspace I want the data flow from, and then select the corresponding data flow Gen 2. Remember, and then click on, then the schedule of the data pipeline would be the schedule of the data flow Gen 2, because it would be triggering it from the data flow Gen 2 itself, from the data pipeline itself. And there are REST API route, which we'll discuss in the automation aspect of the bootcamp.
So if you schedule it from here also and individually also, then I think it will run at both the schedules, right?
Correct. Since both are independent.
Correct.
Schedules. So any queries up till now on the concept of data flow Gen 2? We'll again see the set of transformations in the next session based on the Copilot. Today, we saw the manual route and a simple Copilot of creating the expressions. Any queries?
So Nandan, Copilot is chargeable, like it will reduce the capacity, correct?
Not reduce the capacity, it would utilize the capacity, correct?
Utilize.
Anyhow you're using an F64 capacity, correct? Yeah, F64. So it would be consuming the capacity from that. And how much capacity or what capacity does it consume, that I'll discuss in the subsequent sessions on how the cost pertaining to a Copilot is being captured or calculated.
Okay.
It's based on the concept of tokens. See, what is Copilot? It's basically a Gen AI, correct? For Gen AI, you do pass in certain values, correct? Natural language. The natural language gets converted into tokens. It's based on the tokens that the corresponding cost is calculated. Cost at the CPU utilization. That I'll explain in detail once we go at the end stages of the bootcamp. Now, if you saw, this got succeeded, executed. Now, in case if I want to check, let me go to the other workspace, CSV to Excel, wherein I had the POC Lakehouse. There, can you see it's getting converted? Address something, correct? Address decoded. Now it's getting converted into full delta parquet. Address decoded. And now the data got copied. The transform data got copied into. Can you see only 2 rows are present because we had done all those set of transformations. So now only 2 rows are present in my destination table. Remember, the destination that is supported in the Dataflow Gen 2 is very limited as compared to copy activity. So imagine that you want to do some set of transformation and load it into a destination that is not supported by Dataflow Gen 2. Correct? But you still need to do the transformations. So in that case, what you can do is do the set of transformations and copy that data into a lakehouse. And then leverage the copy activity to copy that data from the lakehouse into the necessary destination, because copy activity supports far more number of sinks or destination as compared to Dataflow Gen 2. So in that case, your lakehouse or the destinations that are supported by lakehouse would act as the staging layer between your final destination and your source. Am I clear? Yes or no?
Yes, Sandeep.
So
Yes.
this is a low code, no code way of doing your set of data transformations. Now, one can disable the Dataflow Gen 1 so that as an organization, we can tell everyone to move away from Dataflow Gen 1 to Dataflow Gen 2 if need be. That's one of the admin settings within the Power Fabric admin portal. So team, any queries?